Deep beneath Vatican City, behind doors that have remained sealed for over 7 centuries, lies a collection so dangerous that only 3 people alive today know of its existence. What if I told you that hidden within the Vatican secret archives sits evidence that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about medieval history, about the Knights Templar, and about the very foundations of Christianity itself? You've heard the stories. The Knights Templar, those warrior monks who rose from humble beginnings to become the most powerful military order in Christendom. Their sudden arrest in 1307, their brutal torture, their mysterious disappearance into the shadows of history. But what you haven't heard is what they left behind. What you haven't heard is what the Vatican has been hiding for over 700 years. Tonight, we're going deep. Deeper than any documentary has dared to go. Deeper than any historian has been allowed to venture. Because the truth about the Templars isn't buried in some dusty tomb or forgotten castle. It's sitting right under our noses, locked away in the most secure archive on earth. But before we descend into those forbidden vaults, you need to understand something crucial. This isn't just another conspiracy theory. This isn't some wild speculation dreamed up by amateur historians. What I'm about to share with you comes from leaked documents, whistleblower testimonies, and evidence that has been systematically suppressed by the highest levels of the Catholic Church. The Knights Templar weren't just protectors of pilgrims. They weren't just medieval bankers or crusading warriors. They were custodians of knowledge so profound, so earth-shattering, that it threatened the very existence of organized religion. And when King Philip IV of France moved against them on that fateful Friday the 13th in 1307, he wasn't just seizing their wealth. He was participating in the greatest cover-up in human history. Here's what mainstream historians won't tell you. In the months leading up to their arrest, the Templars didn't just vanish overnight. They had time to prepare. They had connections throughout Europe. And most importantly, they had somewhere to hide their most precious secrets. But where do you hide knowledge that could topple kingdoms and challenge the word of God himself? You make a deal with the devil, or in this case, you make a deal with the Vatican. Picture this scene. It's October 1307, just days before the mass arrests. A small convoy of Templar knights arrives at the gates of Vatican City under cover of darkness. They carry with them not gold or silver, but something infinitely more valuable. Scrolls, manuscripts, artifacts that they had guarded for nearly 2 centuries. Documents that proved things about early Christianity that would make your blood run cold. The Pope at the time, Clement V, found himself in an impossible position. He could either allow these secrets to fall into the hands of King Philip, who would undoubtedly use them to destroy the Church, or he could accept them into the Vatican's protection, knowing full well that he was becoming complicit in their concealment. He chose concealment. And that choice changed the course of history forever. Now, you might be asking yourself, what could possibly be so dangerous that it required this level of secrecy? What knowledge could the Templars have possessed that was worth protecting at any cost? The answer lies in where they had been and what they had discovered during their time in the Holy Land. For nearly 200 years, the Knights Templar had unprecedented access to sites that were sacred to Christianity, Judaism, and Islam alike. They didn't just build fortresses and fight battles. They dug. They excavated. They explored every inch of ground that had been touched by the feet of prophets and kings. And beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, beneath the very foundation of Solomon's temple, they found something that should never have been found. Something that contradicted everything the Church had taught about the origins of Christianity. Something that proved the official story was not just incomplete, but fundamentally wrong. What they discovered wasn't just historical. It was theological dynamite. Documents written in languages that predated Christ. Artifacts that suggested the story of Jesus was far more complex than anyone had imagined. evidence that the early Christian church had deliberately suppressed entire branches of belief, entire communities of followers who had known a different truth. The Templars became the guardians of this forbidden knowledge, but guardianship comes with a price. The more they learned, the more they realized that their entire worldview was built on foundations of sand. Some of them broke under the weight of this revelation. Others became obsessed, diving deeper into mysteries that human minds weren't meant to comprehend. By the time of their downfall, the Knights Templar had split into factions. Some wanted to reveal everything, to expose the lies and let humanity confront the truth, regardless of the consequences. Others believed the knowledge was too dangerous, that revealing it would plunge the world into chaos and despair. The Vatican sided with the latter group, but they demanded a price for their protection. Not just the documents and artifacts, but complete silence. The surviving Templars would disappear into monasteries, their identities erased, their knowledge sealed away forever. In exchange, their secrets would be preserved but never revealed. This is where the story becomes truly chilling. Because the Vatican didn't just hide these documents in some dusty corner of their archives. They created an entirely separate collection, a shadow library that exists parallel to the official Vatican secret archives. Only the Pope, the Cardinal Secretary of State, and one specially appointed archivist have ever been allowed access. This archivist, known only by the title Custos Secretorum, serves for life. They take vows that make traditional monastic silence look like casual conversation. They are forbidden from speaking about what they guard. They cannot write about it, cannot even acknowledge its existence. When they die, their successor is chosen not by application or recommendation, but by divine revelation claimed by the Pope himself. The current Custos Secretorum has served for over 40 years. They have spent decades alone with knowledge that could reshape human understanding of spirituality, history, and our place in the universe. And according to sources within the Vatican, they are beginning to crack under the pressure. Recent leaks suggest that this guardian of forbidden knowledge has been making copies, digital scans, encrypted files. They believe, like some of the original Templars, that humanity deserves to know the truth, regardless of the consequences. But here's where things get even more disturbing. The Vatican isn't just concerned about protecting old secrets anymore. They're worried about what revealing those secrets might unleash. Because the Templar revelation isn't just about the past, it's about the future. It contains knowledge about human potential, about spiritual capabilities that organized religion has spent centuries convincing us we don't possess. The documents allegedly describe practices, techniques, ways of understanding reality that could fundamentally alter human consciousness. Not through faith or belief, but through direct experience. Through methods that the Church has branded as heretical, dangerous, or impossible. Imagine if everyone could access the divine directly, without intermediaries, without institutions, without the need for organized religion at all. Imagine if the spiritual experiences reserved for saints and mystics were actually available to anyone willing to learn the proper techniques. This is what the Templars discovered. This is what the Vatican has been hiding. And this is why they believe humanity isn't ready for the truth. But ready or not, the truth has a way of surfacing. And according to my sources, we may not have to wait much longer to find out what really lies hidden in those forbidden vaults beneath Vatican City. The evidence for this cover-up isn't just circumstantial anymore. It's becoming impossible to ignore. 3 separate Vatican employees have come forward in the past 18 months, each describing the same mysterious collection that officially doesn't exist. They speak of climate-controlled chambers accessible only through biometric scanners, of documents sealed in nitrogen-filled containers, of artifacts that emit their own faint luminescence. One former maintenance worker, who agreed to speak only under condition of anonymity, described accidentally discovering a hidden elevator shaft while performing routine electrical work. The shaft descended far deeper than any publicly acknowledged level of the Vatican Archives. When he reported this to his supervisor, he was immediately transferred to a different department and made to sign additional confidentiality agreements that threatened excommunication for violations. But perhaps the most compelling testimony comes from a Vatican librarian who spent 15 years working in the official secret archives before being granted temporary access to what insiders call the Omega Collection. Dr. Maria Benedetti, who has since relocated to an undisclosed location outside of Italy, provided detailed descriptions of documents that challenge everything we thought we knew about Christian origins. According to Benedetti, the collection contains correspondence between Templar Grand Masters and Vatican officials that continued for decades after the supposed dissolution of the order. These letters discuss ongoing archaeological discoveries, translation projects, and most disturbing of all, active suppression campaigns designed to eliminate any trace of alternative Christian traditions. She describes seeing papal bulls that were never made public, orders issued to bishops across Europe to destroy specific texts and silence particular scholars. The systematic erasure wasn't random. It targeted anything that suggested early Christianity was far more diverse, far more mystical, and far more empowering to individual believers than the centralized doctrine that eventually prevailed. The Templars, it seems, weren't just collecting these suppressed materials. They were actively preserving traditions that the emerging Catholic orthodoxy was determined to eliminate. Mystery schools, Gnostic communities, esoteric practices that promised direct communion with the divine without the need for priestly intermediation. This is where the story becomes deeply personal for those involved in the cover-up, because we're not talking about abstract theological debates or historical curiosities. We're talking about spiritual technologies that actually work, practices that can induce profound altered states of consciousness, healing techniques that operate through mechanisms science still doesn't understand, methods of perception that reveal layers of reality normally hidden from human awareness. The Vatican's fear isn't just about losing institutional power. It's about unleashing capabilities that they believe could destabilize society itself. What happens when ordinary people discover they can access transcendent states without years of theological study? What happens when healing becomes available through techniques anyone can learn? What happens when the miraculous becomes mundane? Recent developments suggest we may be approaching a tipping point. Digital forensics experts have detected unusual activity on Vatican computer networks. Massive file transfers occurring during off hours, encrypted communications to addresses that trace back to academic institutions and private research facilities around the world. Someone inside the Vatican is preparing to release something significant. The timing isn't coincidental. Pope Francis has made unprecedented statements about the need for transparency within the Church. His calls for openness have created factions within the Vatican hierarchy. Progressive cardinals argue that continued secrecy serves no one and damages the Church's credibility. Conservative elements insist that some truths are too dangerous for public consumption. This internal conflict has created opportunities for those who believe the time for revelation has come. The current Custos Secretorum, now in their 70s and reportedly suffering from a terminal illness, appears to be positioning themselves as history's ultimate whistleblower. They have nothing left to lose and everything to gain by ensuring these secrets survive their own death. Intelligence sources suggest they've been meeting secretly with investigative journalists, documentary filmmakers, and academic researchers, not to provide the documents directly, which would be impossible to verify anyway, but to guide them toward discoveries they can make independently. Breadcrumbs that lead to confirmable facts, connections that can be documented through public records. The pattern is already emerging for those who know how to look. Archaeological discoveries that contradict official timelines. Academic papers that reference sources no one can locate. Museum acquisitions that disappear from catalogues after brief appearances. art restorations that reveal hidden layers containing impossible imagery. Each piece seems insignificant on its own, but together they're painting a picture that matches exactly what the leaked Vatican documents describe. A systematic campaign to hide evidence of humanity's true spiritual heritage. Knowledge that could transform how we understand consciousness, reality, and our own potential. The implications extend far beyond religion. If the Templars really did preserve techniques for accessing non-ordinary states of consciousness, we're talking about insights that could revolutionize psychology, neuroscience, and medicine. If they documented healing practices that work through unknown mechanisms, we might be on the verge of medical breakthroughs that could eliminate suffering on a global scale. But there's a darker possibility that keeps Vatican officials awake at night. What if these preserved traditions don't just offer benefits? What if they also contain warnings about dangers we've forgotten how to recognize? What if the suppression wasn't just about maintaining power, but about protecting humanity from knowledge it wasn't mature enough to handle responsibly? The Templars themselves seem divided on this question. Their final communications, according to leaked sources, reveal deep philosophical splits within the order. Some believed that withholding this knowledge was a crime against humanity. Others argued that revealing it prematurely could trigger catastrophes that would make the Dark Ages look like a golden period of enlightenment. This debate continues today within the highest levels of the Vatican, and according to multiple sources, a decision point is approaching rapidly. The current Pope's health is declining. The internal pressure for disclosure is mounting. The technological means for mass distribution of sensitive materials has never been more accessible. Something is going to break soon. The only question is whether it will be a controlled revelation designed to ease humanity into these new realities, or an explosive disclosure that shatters everything we thought we knew about our past and our potential. The signs are accelerating. Last month, a routine digitization project at the Vatican Library was abruptly suspended when technicians discovered files that shouldn't exist. Database entries pointing to documents with impossible catalogue numbers. References to collections that have no official record of creation. When questioned, senior archivists claimed the entries were data corruption, but the technicians noticed something else. The corrupted files all shared the same access timestamp from 3 years ago. Someone had been systematically accessing these phantom records. That someone appears to be Cardinal Alessandro Toretti, the Vatican's Secretary for Relations with States. Toretti has been making unusual diplomatic contacts recently. Private meetings with ambassadors from countries that have no formal Vatican business. Encrypted communications with universities that specialize in ancient languages and archaeological research. Most tellingly, he's been quietly reaching out to media organizations known for handling sensitive leaks. The pieces are falling into place for what could be the largest information release in Vatican history. But Toretti isn't acting alone. Sources indicate he's working with a network of church officials who believe the time for secrecy has passed. They call themselves the Order of Veritas, and they've been planning this revelation for over a decade. Their motivation isn't rebellion or revenge. It's something far more profound. They believe humanity has reached a spiritual crisis that can only be resolved by reconnecting with our true heritage. The knowledge preserved in the Omega collection isn't just historical curiosity. It's a roadmap for human evolution that we desperately need. Consider what we're facing as a species. Environmental collapse, social fragmentation, a growing sense that traditional institutions are failing us. The Order of Veritas argues that these crises stem from a fundamental disconnection from our deeper nature. We've forgotten who we really are and what we're capable of becoming. The Templar documents allegedly describe human beings as creatures of unlimited potential who have been systematically taught to limit ourselves. Not through malicious intent, but through well-meaning institutions that feared what might happen if everyone accessed their full capabilities simultaneously. The controlled release of spiritual knowledge was seen as a necessary safeguard against chaos, but that controlled release became total suppression. Generation after generation grew up believing they were powerless, dependent on external authorities for salvation, healing, and truth. The very capacities that make us human became relegated to the realm of miracles and saints. What should have been ordinary became extraordinary. The leaked documents describe techniques that were once common knowledge, methods for healing that required no instruments or medicines, ways of perceiving that revealed the interconnected nature of all existence, practices that could induce states of consciousness where individual identity dissolved into universal awareness. These weren't religious experiences in the conventional sense. They were technologies of transformation. The Templars discovered that early Christian communities regularly engaged in these practices. The apostles weren't unique in their abilities. They were simply trained in techniques that had been passed down through mystery schools for millennia. What we call miracles were actually demonstrations of human potential operating according to laws we've forgotten how to recognize. This knowledge didn't disappear accidentally. It was systematically eliminated because it threatened the emerging power structure of organized Christianity. A religion based on direct spiritual experience has no need for intermediaries. A population that can heal itself has no need for medical monopolies. A society that understands its interconnectedness has little tolerance for artificial hierarchies. The Vatican's archives contain documentation of this suppression campaign spanning centuries. Letters ordering the destruction of libraries, instructions for identifying and silencing practitioners of ancient techniques, detailed accounts of how entire traditions were rebranded as heretical or demonic to justify their elimination. But the Templars preserved more than just historical records. They maintained living lineages, unbroken chains of teachers who continued practicing these ancient arts in secret. The documents describe hidden schools operating throughout Europe, disguised as monasteries, trade guilds, and noble houses. Each generation carefully selected and trained the next, ensuring that humanity's true heritage would survive the dark age of enforced ignorance. These lineages still exist. The Order of Veritas has been in contact with their modern representatives. Ordinary people living ordinary lives who carry extraordinary knowledge, passed down through their families for generations. They've been waiting for the right moment to emerge from hiding. That moment appears to be approaching. The technological revolution has created unprecedented opportunities for rapid information dissemination. What once required decades of careful infiltration and gradual influence can now be accomplished in hours through digital networks. The Vatican's ability to control information has been fundamentally compromised. But there's another factor driving the urgency for disclosure. The preserved techniques aren't just intellectual curiosities. They're practical solutions to problems humanity faces right now. Climate change, social inequality, mental health crises, the breakdown of community bonds. These challenges require responses that go beyond conventional thinking. The Templar archives allegedly contain detailed instructions for technologies that operate on principles science hasn't rediscovered yet. Not mechanical devices, but methods for organizing human consciousness in ways that produce measurable effects on physical reality. Collective meditation practices that can influence weather patterns. Healing techniques that work by adjusting the body's energetic systems. Communication methods that transcend the limitations of language and distance. These claims sound impossible from our current perspective, but they're supported by increasing amounts of scientific research. Studies on the placebo effect reveal the mind's power to heal the body through belief alone. Research on quantum entanglement suggests instant connections between particles regardless of distance. Investigations into consciousness show that focused attention can influence random number generators and other physical systems. We're rediscovering through expensive research what the ancients preserved through direct experience. The difference is that scientific validation takes decades, while traditional training could produce results in months or years. The Vatican has been sitting on instruction manuals for capabilities we're just beginning to recognize as possible. The ethical implications are staggering. How many people have suffered from diseases that could have been easily healed using suppressed techniques? How many conflicts could have been resolved through methods of communication that reveal our fundamental unity? How many environmental disasters could have been prevented by societies that understood their intimate connection with natural systems? The Order of Veritas argues that continued suppression isn't just immoral, it's become impossible. Too many independent researchers are approaching the same discoveries from different directions. Archaeological evidence keeps surfacing despite attempts to limit access to sensitive sites. Ancient texts are being translated by AI systems that can't be intimidated or corrupted. The truth is emerging whether the Vatican cooperates or not. Their strategy appears to be getting ahead of the inevitable revelation by controlling its timing and context. Rather than allowing the information to surface through hostile leaks or academic discoveries, they want to present it as part of the Church's evolution toward greater transparency and service to humanity. Pope Francis has been laying groundwork for this approach through his emphasis on mercy, inclusion, and social justice. His statements about the need to embrace mystery and remain open to new understanding could be interpreted as preparation for revelations that challenge traditional doctrine. Progressive theologians have already begun discussing how ancient wisdom traditions might be integrated with modern Christianity, but resistance within the Vatican remains fierce. Conservative cardinals argue that any acknowledgement of suppressed knowledge would undermine the Church's authority and trigger a crisis of faith among believers. They point to surveys showing that many Catholics already struggle with doubt about traditional teachings. Admitting to centuries of deliberate concealment could destroy what remains of institutional credibility. The debate has created unprecedented divisions within church hierarchy. Some officials have reportedly been reassigned or forced into early retirement for expressing support for disclosure. Others have been promoted to positions where they can influence the decision-making process. The Vatican has become a battleground between those who believe truth serves God and those who believe institutional survival serves God. Intelligence sources suggest the conflict may be reaching a breaking point. The current Pope's declining health has intensified efforts by both factions to position themselves for the succession. Progressive cardinals want to ensure that disclosure occurs under Francis's papacy to maintain continuity with his reformist agenda. Conservatives are working to delay any revelations until they can install a more traditional successor. This internal struggle has created opportunities for external pressure. Governments that have been monitoring Vatican activities are beginning to demand explanations for unusual security measures around certain archive sections. Academic institutions are filing formal requests for access to materials their research suggests should exist. Media organizations are investigating discrepancies between official statements and leaked evidence. The convergence of these pressures may force the Vatican's hand sooner than anyone anticipated. When institutional secrets reach a critical mass of external scrutiny, controlled disclosure becomes the only alternative to chaotic exposure. The Church may find itself choosing between revelation on their terms or revelation despite their resistance. What emerges from this crisis could reshape not just Christianity, but human civilization itself. We may be approaching a moment when the artificial boundaries between science and spirituality, between individual and collective consciousness, between human and divine potential, finally dissolve. The knowledge preserved by the Templars and hidden by the Vatican may hold keys to transformations we can barely imagine. The question isn't whether this revelation will occur. The question is whether humanity is mature enough to handle what it reveals about our true nature and capabilities. The Vatican's centuries of secrecy may have been motivated by genuine concern for our collective readiness. Now, we're about to discover whether that concern was justified or whether we've been underestimating our own potential for wisdom and responsibility. So here we stand at the threshold of the greatest revelation in human history. The Vatican's 700-year silence is cracking, the Templar secrets are stirring, and the truth about our forgotten potential is clawing its way toward the light. Whether through controlled disclosure or explosive leak, these hidden archives will soon spill their contents into our world. The only question remaining is this: when that moment comes, when everything we thought we knew about spirituality, consciousness, and human capability gets turned upside down, will you be ready to remember who you really are?